Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and a little bit later on, I'll be joined by Quinny to talk all things Celtic. It's been a huge week in the world of Celtic. Most weeks are pretty big in terms of talking points, but Quinny and I will be talking all about them one by one. There he is. I'm going to ask you your T-shirt. Is that your man? Yes, it is. Great to see you, Quinny. I love it. We have got a lot to discuss. I was just running through the comments, actually. I could probably once a week go through a show and just bring up the comments because they really are giving you the emotion of being a Celtic fan right now, Quinny. I want to talk about the game yesterday. We're obviously moving into an international week. I know you'll continue to be busy. It's not everybody's bag, but it allows us to reset, not just on a football park. I'm splitting it up at the moment into 4 different sections, right? You've got the football park, the dugout, the terraces, you can call them stands if you want, and the boardroom. And it's all about, of course, those 4 elements all coming together. And there was something of a coming together at the game yesterday. There's nothing quite like a last-gasp winner, Quinny. But across the piece, I think we probably deserved the win.
I thought we were great. I'm catching some of the comments here as well. I think there's fair enough. I'm a wee bit late, so sorry about that. I actually just spent an hour recording the breakdown of the game at the weekend to realise that I didn't record anything. So
you're joking.
Yeah, one of those rookie errors that comes around once in a while.
No, can I jump in? I have got the worst example of that of all time, right? And it might have changed the course of my life, right? I wrote the Quality Street Gang on an old laptop. The laptop broke down 3 days before the deadline. I had no backup, nothing. Couldn't even switch the power on. It was a Quality Street Gang manuscript, and this was the final deadline. Gone. Everything gone. So I've been there. I might bore you with the details as to how I managed to get it back up and running. If the first book hadn't happened, I don't think anything else after that would have happened, Quinny. But there you go. I feel your pain, mate. That's outrageous. At least you've done a wee bit of research on the game.
Yeah, I've done a dry run, haven't I? So had a wee dress rehearsal, so it should be even better in theory then, shouldn't it, second time around? So wish me luck for that after this. But I thought we played great. Honestly, there was so many. Well, we didn't blow them away. We didn't dominate the match or anything like that, But compared to what's been missing in the team over the last month, we had spades of it yesterday. Really, I think the number one thing, I was chatting about this after the Braga game. One of my mates had the ticket, invited me along to the match, which was nice of him. And there was a moment in the first half where Kennedy brings over McGregor and he talks about changing the press on Braga, just put an extra man up and do this and do that kind of thing. And it kind of helped us in that match. But that's the way we started against Motherwell. And if you look at, I think in the highlight package, it's maybe the first highlight that's on. We get a mistake from them. McGregor gets a chance at the near post as off the back of it. And that's us pressing with, even more so. So I think, not to go into it all, because I say I'll be kind of having to pour over it all again, but there was so much. There was a good balance. We had a good route to go. We had clear phases of play, and we really made it. Although Motherwell were very good at times at playing out from the back and playing their game, made it super hard for them. And the Gren's goal comes from a mistake from this exact thing that I'm talking about as well. So I would honestly, I thought the first half we looked good despite it being a draw, and ultimately when the game's done, I'm coming out with it with a lot of positives for the whole team. Really, I thought it was a well played game.
Yes, I'm going to tap into certain elements of that game, Quinny. But before I do that, I will bring in some of the comments. Thanks everybody for getting involved. Last few months have been mega busy, not just about signings and who's coming and who's going, but obviously the uprising of the Celtic Fans Collective. And we will have something of an update on here in relation to that later on, because I'm going to ask one of the representatives, maybe even a couple of the representatives, to come on and speak to you for the last 15 minutes, fill you in on what's happening tonight at 6 o'clock, keep you updated on everything in relation to that. The meeting takes place at 6 o'clock at Celtic Park, and it will be attended by Michael Nicholson and Chris Mackay. I will be in attendance. I will be there with my wee notepad, as I always have. As you know, I use a journal. I'm one of those sad guys that could tell you anything about any minute of any Celtic game in the last 5 years, Quinny, because it's all written down. Rob Lilly, you're in, and it's a YouTube. Hail on a magnificent Monday. I just thought we'd start off with a bit of positivity, Rob. Thank you very much for that. And Barry O'Sullivan, hopefully yesterday will turn the season around for Maeda. Going to need him back to his best for the rest of the season. I'm going to jump right in at this point because you've brought Maeda up, right? And it's a good point because I think when you watch his performance yesterday, he spends some time on the right, some time on the left, and obviously through the middle as well, Quinny. Does what he's told, knuckles up, knuckles in. And I think that the Brendan Rodgers quote the other week there about do it for your family, do it for your teammates, do it for the fans. It's one of the ones where no matter how many times you bang that drum, it's down to the individual. He scores the goal, right? And I've got two things to say in relation to Maeda. He scored 3 goals and had a couple of assists this season. Not quite the form of last season, obviously. He's missed a lot of big chances, hasn't he, in the last few months. First thing I'm going to say is, where do you play him moving forward? But secondly, and a slight disagreement from Barry, I don't think we're going to see this till the end of the season because I don't think it's healthy to keep a player who has been so far mentally removed from the football club only to be dragged back in and asked to perform. I don't think it's healthy. I think a lot of people talking about the COVID season in the last few weeks, Quinny. One of the biggest issues of the COVID season on the park were the people who didn't want to play for Celtic being held against their will, under duress, to play for the football club. And I do not want that to happen again. Maeda's been a phenomenal servant, I think, since he came in. He's been an absolute icon, maybe a cult icon. We might look back on him as a cult icon, I'm not sure. But I don't think we keep him for the rest of the season. As much as I love him, Quinny, you can't have unhappy players, checked out players, etc., whatever the term is, and keep them at the club, because it's a recipe for disaster, in my view. What's your take?
I think generally you're right. Like, it's more often than not just not going to end well. Just with when the window opens, like, I don't think Maeda's got that in his bag, but people push for moves and can make things awkward and difficult and that sort of thing. And he probably feels no loyalty or any real, need to be courteous with the powers that be at Parkhead anymore, when it comes to this. So it might be gloves off for him in January if it wasn't like just on the cards anyway. So I make you quite right there. But I do think like the goals he scored this year, he's been celebrating them like he's never celebrated before, and it might be a wee bit of get every drop out of this before I leave attitude, because he's also got a pal in Kyogo that's not exactly went on to, hit the heights ever since leaving. So maybe a little bit of enjoy it while you're here attitude from him. But again, you just never know what turns around in January. If the same offers that were in don't come back, or the kind of offer he wants doesn't come around, whatever that is, like, I think you can see from the way he's celebrating goals that if he is bought in, like, cool, like, let's just go with it, So it's really down to the individual. I think in terms of where you play him, like, you could play him anywhere. I think it's one of those ones where we just actually don't have any right-hand side choices anyone is super comfortable or content with, where, oh yeah, first 11, play him every week, that'll be fine. Because there's a caveat, there's a compromise with almost everyone. And with Dyson, you probably get the least compromises when it comes to who you pick for right wing.
For me, the way I'm looking at it now is the way we set up yesterday is the way I would set up. I think Tuneki on the left, one of his quieter afternoons, I'd have him on the left. Iheanacho, who I want to talk about a wee bit more, I'd have him through the middle with Maeda on the right. And your backups then, you're looking at Balikwisha. Again, I think there's a noteworthy performance there from Balikwisha. And then Jamesy Forrest is my backup to Maeda on the right. I don't know if, and I was asking the group this morning, if Brendan Rodgers has mentioned the fitness of Yang, or if he's just dropped out the squad, Quinny. But again, in a similar scenario to Maeda, whereby he's obviously travelled down to Birmingham to sign a contract. We didn't have enough cover, therefore he doesn't sign the deal, and whether or not that's affecting him, and that's why he's out the team, as yet unconfirmed. The backup to centre forward is more of an issue for me, because your backup to centre forward is Dyson Maeda. So Johnny Kenny's there. He's on the bench. He's in the building. But in terms of quality, your backup for Iheanacho, for me, is Dyson. So a lot of players' names who I will be mentioning in more detail in a second or two. Joe Hamilton comes in from the YouTube in the meantime. Afternoon troops, feeling confident for the first time in a long time after seeing the team still has some fight. Quinny, it's incredible what that type of win can do for you, both as a fan base and as a team. It can galvanise you. It can be one of these things that becomes a turning point. You can look back in previous seasons. We always go back to the Adam Ida moments a couple of seasons back, don't we? Fir Park, Easter Roads, these games where he really stepped up. I remember the late goal at Fir Park by Matt O'Reilly. I remember the Ross County goal under Ange Postecoglou, where we scored in the 97th minute. These are moments sometimes where it's scrappy and it's not a vintage performance, but it really can turn around your series. It's like a psychological thing, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It's like I don't know if it's quite shared trauma, but it's definitely like a bonding thing with the team, isn't it? Together coming over the obstacle and kind of coming out of it, our side victorious. And that was the big thing. Yesterday, there was so many players that had a point to prove. Like from the ones that started, you're looking at McKeown, of course, coming back into the team, Hatate coming back into the team with, kind of mixed reviews and opinions at the moment. But then even Negren and Engels coming on for them later in the match, 2 players with huge points to prove. Balaquish had the same right at the end. And I think it's definitely got the potential to be, when you mentioned those ones, all those ones come to my mind too. But it feels like we've had like 5 or 6 of those games at Rugby Park over the years, from Tom Rogic goals and 1 or 2 other things. There always seems to be a Kilmarnock game that turns the season somehow for somebody.
Yeah.
So yeah, but we've seen it before. I definitely wouldn't rule it out. And I think I kind of said in my first draft of the video, but like that performance, the result, obviously we need the win, right? But that performance and the Celtic fan collective thing today at 6 and where everything is at right now, the international windows came at a lovely time to just move, close the book on this chapter of the season. And can the club from behind, you're mentioning the terraces, and can there be a bit more harmony come from that side of things, where some questions get answered and there's progress seen to be happening to match up with now, I think, like some pretty significant progress we've seen on the pitch in terms of synergizing the team and getting things firing on all cylinders again.
I was hearing a lot at the weekend, Quinny. A lot of people mentioning the dreaded COVID season, perhaps because you've got one eye on the table and you're thinking, are we going to blow this? And I was comparing it far more to the first season of Brendan's return, where there was a lot of performances that I felt lacked that energy, the bounce, the belief almost that we were going to get the result. And I used that Hearts game, I remember at Celtic Park, where it was so flat. The whole energy, it was so flat. They beat us 2-0. And I remember after that game wondering to myself if we had it in us in terms of that mentality to actually go on and win the league that season. And obviously we did turn it around. Now, I will maintain a huge part of that was James Forrest coming back into the side, but also the January window, because I think Ida was massive and there's no getting away from that. In that 6-month loan period that he spent at Celtic, I thought he was huge for us, winning the double. Obviously scores the winner in the Scottish Cup final, but there were games, games in the league where he was the game changer. He was the guy, the match winner. And I was looking at that season far more than the COVID one, because COVID, there were some elements, I think the unhappy players is an issue, and it's one I want to touch on today. But the COVID season suffered also from bad recruitment, like really, really poor recruitment. And we have spoken about the recruitment this time round as well, Quinny. But the one thing I think is different is we've actually got players who have come in and are making a positive impact, who have just arrived in the summer. Iheanacho is a clear one. Chunetke, I think, has made a good impact. Nigrin, I want to talk about him a wee bit today, and Sarachi so far. On the fence with the rest of them, going to be honest with you, Balakwisha included. But those 4, I think they have come in the summer and made a positive contribution. And you also look at the events of yesterday and what it's going to do to these guys, new guys coming in, that bonding process, them being galvanised as well. There's my favourite word. I really need to be banned from saying galvanised. That's the last thing I'm saying it. But it's huge when you look at the actual success stories so far in the transfer window. That's 4 decent enough acquisitions so far, I would say.
Yeah, they're definitely ones that are contributing into the team. There's no two way about that. I think when it comes to when it comes to the COVID season, I'm always quite bemused that the likes of Edward and Ayer and all that, like knowing, like they'd been here for like 3 years prior or something like that. Like they were fully aware of the gravity of the event, of the season, of the achievement. I just can't ever, and I know like they want away and da. I know the stories have came out and people know bits of what happened. I just can't get my head around how you can be a professional player on the cusp of genuine immortality and think, oh, I want to go to Crystal Palace. Oh, I want to go to Brentford. Like, if you're still playing that well, that move will happen anyway. You're still 21, 22, whatever age all these guys were at the time. So I worry, like, is that we've recruited wrong individuals? Have we maybe, like, Ayer was here for ages, obviously he's a little bit different, you know, but if we, like, how can they not be set up already for this is the year? Like, you know, nobody leaves. We're only bringing guys in. We are guaranteeing getting this over the line. So that's something that I always kind of wrestle with. I just don't, there's something I just don't get. Like, how can you not win 9 in a row and know next year is like the biggie, you know? So, when it comes to the recruitment for this year, the guys you're mentioning, Sriracha, Taneke, Iheanacho, and Negren, I think have been great contributors to the team this year. And the problem's been with some of them, or with maybe all the transfers, is when our squads looked at our best was probably under Ange, really, when he had a window or two under his belt where you really didn't know who the front three was going to be every week. Every week it was Giakoumakis and Kyogo was the debate. Every week it was Ada, Jota, Maeda, who plays left, who plays right, who's on the bench, you know. And then when you look at the bench, doesn't matter what the result is, when you're bringing on Abada and Giakoumakis for anyone, like, you're cool with that. There's no problem. And guys like Taneke, maybe Balikwisha, maybe Negren, Engels, you know, they are kind of now filling into that mold of, you know, if the level of the squad can get back to where we think it is in terms of how well they can perform on the pitch, you know. And again, this is something I mentioned when we signed Engels, that those sorts of transfer fees should be normal. We should have £10 million players on the bench after a while, you know, £6 million defenders on the, you know, that should be kind of normalised. And the performance we got yesterday, like, I thought Hatate and McKeown were very good. I thought Engels was very good. McGregor was very good. But rather than it being like Abada and Giakoumakis coming off the bench, what we've did is went Negren and Engels off the bench, and they've gave us a different dimension in midfield, and they've come on with a real point to prove. And for me, they were the two that really got us over the line on the day, because they just really had the bit between the teeth. So I think all these transfers work when you've got that bigger squad looked after. The problem becomes when you sell Odsonne Edouard and you buy Albion Ajeti, and it's like, well, that's a bit different. If we kept Edouard, Griffiths probably doesn't need mentioned at this point, and you sign Ajeti, then that's probably a fine transfer. He scored maybe like 10 goals for us, Ajeti, or something like. If he's like the third striker, the second striker, he's probably fine, you know. But when you're relying on these guys to be number one, that's inevitably the problem.
That does become a huge issue, and I do want to touch on it. I don't know if I ever will go back and watch the games that we played during that COVID season.
No.
You know, you're shaking your head there, and no wonder it was so grim. But from memory, I'm not sure Chris Ayer downed tools. A lot of people say the same about Odsonne Edouard. I thought Chris Ayer's performances, and you know, by the way, it was quite a low bar, but were amongst the best in the squad. And he leaves, and you know, he leaves for me with best wishes, because I don't think he let us down as an individual. Odsonne Edouard gets that constantly. And I know it's not as easy as this, but when you look at the 3 goal scoring seasons that he enjoyed as a permanent Celtic centre forward, Quinny, he had that spell on loan, obviously. He scores 11 and 29. But the 3 seasons that he spent, 23 and 52, 29 and 47, 22 and 40. Now, I know it comes down to minutes and all the rest of it, but he still contributed that season. But again, it was his body language, wasn't it? It was the unwillingness to fight. I remember being at a game prior to that particular campaign. It might have been my last away game I went to before the lockdown. I was with Kev Graham, in actual fact, at McDermott Park, where you can hear everything. And it was a quagmire of a pitch as well. And Ryan Christie was going through Edouard for his lack of work rate. So I don't know if it was, always there, but it was highlighted more during the COVID season. But me and Kev, you were laughing all the way through that 90 minutes, because it was a game that I'm pretty sure it was Christie that scores the winner, 1-0 cup game. But he went through Edouard for 90 minutes, and it was all to do with his application, his work rate. So I think he had that in him anyway, COVID or not, wanting away or not. I think that's the type of guy he was. In any case, the reason I bring it up is because if you've got a group of unhappy players, it does add to the melting pot of, if a few guys aren't playing at the best of form, or there's, unease in the stadium because of what's happening off the park. It doesn't help as an ingredient within that melting pot. And I do have my concerns for January. So Maeda, we've already mentioned, and it's great. He's scoring these goals and celebrating, like you say, like it's, the last thing he'll do in a Celtic jersey. if he and Yang, who has dropped out the squad, and potentially Rio, and I say potentially because Rodgers did mention him in the same breath as Maeda when he was talking about end of cycles, if they are unhappy and they maybe have been promised a move in the summer there, Quinny, and they don't get it, they're maybe looking at January thinking, well, I'll get it now. So maybe the end of the season's too far of a stretch. And I would suggest, based on the unhappy players who were held back during the COVID season, you've got to let them go. I think you've got to let them go. And, you know, we go back into that cliche of January being a difficult window. Quinny, we can't have unhappy players at this football club. If this is more like Brendan's first season, then the second half's going to be much better. But recruitment's a huge part of that. And by the way, you're losing Maeda and Rio, who start most games, if that's the case. Therefore, your incomings have to be at that level, ready to hit the ground running like Ida did in Rodgers' first season. This is a slight concern I've got come January.
Yeah, I think, like, I was thinking about this the other day, but the Celtic, like the transfer department or whatever, they really need to look at this year. It's like the whole warm-up to Champions League qualification next year, because that's surely got to just be the number one priority of the transfer department, is get us, you know, the players to get us back into the group stages next year. Whatever hoops we need to jump through to make that happen. I don't think anyone's totally clear on the whole domino effect of the situation right now with coefficients year to year, etc. So, yeah, I would be very, very surprised if, like, there's no reason why we can't just sign guys now and just confirm the deals and get them done. There's no real reason for it at all. And especially if you do have ones to go out that could be lined up as well, like your Dysons and Yangs, maybe even Hitate as well, then, yeah, leaving it until January, like we always do, or like we never do, depending on how you want to look at it, it's just going to be deja vu all over again. And good years gone by, the club's always quite happy to talk about, oh, we did January business for the summer, so we're not doing much summer business until we qualify for the Champions League, and then we'll do it. But this year there was like no January business to replace really what was leaving, and then the summer business didn't make up for it either. So the January window needs to be like 2.5 windows worth of gain for us, especially when you're thinking about the amount of guys that are leaving. And yeah, do you have the confidence that they'll be able to do that in the budget that they're playing with? I'd probably say no, because
it's a worry.
Yeah. Whereas, like, at this point, they should just be like, with the money you've got, like we've mentioned before on the show, like, it should just be the difference maker between we couldn't quite get that deal over the line. Pay the guy an extra $2,000 a week, give the club an extra $500,000, whatever it is. Just if there's a guy that you want, a guy that will fit the bill, you know, don't go with the third guy on the list, because that's just not, footballers are not fungible in that sense, where one's just as good as the other. Get the guy that's really the guy, and then deal with it from there. So I don't think they'll take that approach, which is why I'm not too confident that if we did sell like 3 or 4 big players in January, we would get anywhere near the level of replacements in on time. And that really puts things on a knife edge. Now, I've seen people in my comment section on videos saying things like, we actually really have a title race on our hands. I see Celtic drawing so many matches. I don't see a killer edge. And, also we've moved on from the weekend now. Comments will change, I'm sure. But if we mess up in January, there's like serious, immediate term consequences potentially.
Yeah, big time. And this is my concern, because at this moment in time, before anybody leaves the building, Quinny, you and I and everybody in the comments can already name a number of positions that already need strengthened. So if you, on top of that, then lose the 3 guys we've mentioned, then you can double how many quality signings need to come in January. How often have we done that? I mean, I can only remember a really, really successful January transfer window when Andrew was in the hot seat, and we bring in 4 and 3 of them work out. Now, that is off the scale success in terms of Celtic in the January transfer window. That wouldn't be good enough this January if we lose the 3 guys we've mentioned. So I do have some concerns, and I don't want to put a bit of a dampener on all the positivity that we're feeling after a really good win yesterday, and the fact that there's a bit of I would say expectation coming from tonight's meeting. Jungle Boy asks if I'm going to be there. Yes, I will be in the meeting, Jungle Line, to see exactly what happens. So we're going to bring in somebody from the collective nearer the end of this show. But just to let you understand what's going to happen tonight, and I'll read this directly from the communication that went out to everybody who signed the open letter, it says that in order to ensure the collective's representation is as broad and reflective of the wider support as possible, Boys Celtic, Celtic Trust, Green Brigade and North Curve Celtic have kindly each given up one representative to the collective, because these groups were included in the initial email and they were all invited along times two. So what they've said is, the collective weren't invited separately as a separate entity, therefore we'll send one and the collective can also send some representation. This means that in total, the Celtic Fans Collective will have 7 representatives at the meeting, in addition to those representing other fan organisations who are also members of the collective, like those mentioned previously. The 7 collective representatives are also on the steering group and represent a mix of CSCs and fan media, which is where I come in, and that's why I'll be there. Our goal remains clear: to secure meaningful positive change for the betterment of Celtic Football Club and its supporters, and to get answers to the questions raised in the open letter of the 3rd of September. So to let you know who's actually going to be in the meeting, obviously the Celtic representatives will be Michael Nicholson and Chris Mackay. There will be 7 from the Celtic Fans Collective, but those 7 include CSC representatives and fan media representatives. The affiliation of Registered Celtic Supporters Club will have 2. Association of Irish Celtic Supporters Club will have 2. The Celtic Disabled Supporters Association also 2. And the Celtic Supporters Association will have 2. Boys Celtic, Celtic Trust, Green Brigade and North Curve Celtic will have 1 representative each. And then the North of Ireland Celtic Supporters Clubs will have 2. They are not, that organisation is not part of the collective. They have also been invited by the football club. So we go into that, and as I say, we'll have more information later on in this show as to what to expect. What is really the objective of tonight's meeting? I think there's wide-ranging objectives and ambitions and visions and things for me that need to be addressed with a football club on an ongoing basis. It's not just about one meeting. It's not just about one transfer window, Quinny. It's not just about one action, if you like. It's about Celtic being in the best possible position for the next 25, 50, 100 years. I remember watching the old Celtic history video that is on my shelf somewhere up there. Marco Vanni doing the narration. It was a brilliant video, right? So anybody from my kind of era would have got that Christmas 1988. So we were into the 1988-89 season, which wasn't as memorable, but it was all about looking back on the Celtics centenary. And I always remember near the end, in fact, I think he got the last word on it, the end of the video, it was a Celtic super fan. So back then, I think, Quinny, it was the version of Paul the Tim back then, right? And it was a Celtic super fan. And they interviewed him intermittently throughout the history. And at the end, he said, what I would love to do again is another 9 in a row and to win the European Cup. So it's up to Big Billy and the man upstairs. And I remember sitting there as a kid thinking, right, wow, Celtic have been around for 100 years. I wonder if we can do that again in the next 100. But it seems like an abstract, to use a term you've used in the past, an abstract time period, because you can't even imagine what 100 years is. Yet here I am sitting in 2025, and hopefully I'll still be kicking about in another 40 years, Quinny, right? With aspirations about Celtic. And always go back to that 9 in a row where we've done that. We've done that since this old fella was talking on that video. We might do it again. European aspirations. What are the club's European aspirations for the next 5, 7, 25, 50, 100 years? We don't know, because they don't know. And this is a bigger issue for me, a much longer term issue where the club needs to have all this in place, Quinny. It can't be like we're going into January saying we need to do something to save this season. We're going into the summer saying we need to prepare for this season's Champions League qualifiers. That's a nonsense. We need to be so far ahead of the curve where we're buying players 3 seasons ago who might just be getting nurtured for the Kairat game. But we're so far behind the curve. We need to change the short-termism, I think.
We are behind the curve, but we've also been kind of close to being on the, like, if we kept O and didn't sell him, like, we can see how he's scoring in Belgium, and who's to say if he'd have done the same thing if he'd stayed here. But that's a guy that we were nurturing, we were bringing on. He was third striker, then he got second striker, and then he got told you're going back to third, and he was like, nah, I'm not doing this again, and he went and done one, which, fine, whatever. So we've kind of fit in, like the academy, the chat that they did on one of those things where they sit in front of a camera on YouTube and give you all the easy answers to stuff. One of the things they said was they want the academy to produce Champions League players, and the academy structure and what it's yielded over the years is, of course, subject to a lot of dismay from Celtic fans. But I think over the last year, I've gave them a lot of latitude on this because of the Barrowfield development that they've basically just about finished, I think, because, if you're breaking ground on a facility like that, that is a real, that's a real crossroads. That's a real new future that you're kind of laying out there by having all that at your disposal, the facilities, the integration that comes with that, with players and young players and moving them up the ranks. But we can certainly say with the current structure we've got that our youth department can produce Europa League players. I don't think anyone's going to really argue with the fact of, even if you look at guys that aren't here anymore, like your Mikey Johnsons and your Welshes and Vata and whoever, like if you had to play them in some of these games that we've just went by, probably, Donovan is obviously the best example right now. But in a few years' time, like if the academy stuff does really kick in and does really work, like you're talking about buying players 3 or 4 windows in advance, that will still be a very important part of the strategy. But you can't guarantee there's always going to be a guy in a window that you can buy that fits the mold. So if you've got this kind of factory of players coming out, again, they might not all be fantastic, they might not all be first team level, but as long as they can be to a level, then it gives you a lot more freedom to maybe go around that, and gives the club a chance to maybe make some more money in transfer fees on top of it. Then you've got a kind of compounding situation there where you've got more guys in the squad you don't need to buy, and then you've got more guys you didn't need to buy that you can sell, and you've then got like a really healthy kind of squad dynamic.
I like the theory behind that. I really do. And as you say, I think the Barrowfield development is a statement of intent. My only concern is the system that has failed to produce players for our first team as regularly as it should is just moving into a different building. So you've got the nice facilities and all the rest of it. It doesn't matter if you've got a better ice bath or a better training regime. If we're not producing footballers, that's not going to change. And I think that comes down to people. It comes down to the people within the academy. So hopefully that's something else. But we don't know because we don't get spoken to. We don't know if there are plans to change that approach as well. Celtic are built on the traditions of producing our own, and we should continue to produce our own footballers. So I would love to see it. And I've still not gone back and found out in the last 25 years, let's just say, how many Celtic graduates have come through and played 50 or more games for Celtic, because it's not many. It's not many. I'm going to suggest it was about 10. It's not that many, So unfortunately, that side of it's not working. There is a statement of intent by building the complex. Let's just hope it can produce footballers now. Ewan Boy Martin, Russell Martin joins the likes of Craigie White. Thanks for the memories. Yes, we did find out kind of late last night. Russell Martin has joined a long list of Rangers managers who Brendan Rodgers has seen off. I'm not want to talk about Rangers, but what I do want to talk to you about, Quinny, is where we are in terms of the domestic challenge. As you already said, there is a title race. There is. We're sitting second at the moment as we go into another international break. So Martin's sacked. And I mean, look, we're going to go back. You've got the exact date, but it was sometime in May. You said Hearts are going to finish second, right?
Yeah.
Was it the 19th of May? Something like that, right?
Something like that, yeah.
You called it. So I'm looking now at where we are. Hearts are 2 points ahead of us and 2 goals better off. I don't know what's going to happen at Ibrox. Is their season written off? Who knows? Will they go for McInnes? I don't know. That adds another dynamic to it. But Celtic and Hearts are both unbeaten. And our next few fixtures are Dundee on the 19th away, Sturm Graz at home on the 23rd, and then Hearts at Tynecastle on the 26th. They only have Kilmarnock to play prior to that fixture. So I'm looking at that now and I'm thinking, look, whatever happens to Rangers down there, that's fine. They're not going to be challenging for the league, I don't think. And the names I've seen, I think it's to pacify the fans. If they were to bring back Stephen Gerrard, it's just to pacify the fans. I mean, sacking Martin because he was rotten, but you look at some of the guys who've already sacked who had decent records. Clermont even had a decent record compared to Martin. Van Bronckhorst, Beale, 72% win rate. Anyway, I'm not interested in any of that nonsense. Hearts, let's talk Hearts at the moment, Quinny. How are you feeling? Because, I mean, you called that a few months ago.
I think it's what we need as Celtic, like as a fan base. It's something we should not necessarily be happy about, but certainly welcome, because it's just really just shows I've said this on the show, I think about a month or two ago, but it really does just show up a mirror to the Celtic transfer department, the powers that be, that getting good quality players at wherever your budget is not impossible. Getting players that can really fit a system, doing business quickly. Being in Scotland isn't so terrible, where you need to beg people to come and take them hostage. Like, bit of a side note, Aberdeen signed a guy this summer called Jesper Karlsson, who is a guy that we 1000% should have been all over. Like, when that guy was in Holland, he would have been like way out of our price range. He went for a lot of money to Italy. It didn't really work out for him. I think he scored a few at the weekend, in fact. But again, you don't see like Jesper Karlsson going to Aberdeen. You look at the guys that Hearts have picked up themselves from around European and world football. Scotland's not that bad a place. It's not like the Dark Ages. It's not like medieval times where they're going to need to sleep outside and they don't get running water and the sun never shines. And the way people make it out to be.
For one of the 5 clubs, then
well, fair enough. Yeah, if it's Dunfermline or something, maybe that may be part of it. But I think that they've really, and it's something I was on here talking about Dumbarton as well about a year ago or whenever all that happened, and really Scottish football has huge opportunity in it if you can recruit well, and that's the number one. That's why I was so bullish on the Hearts thing as soon as he appointed McInnes, because he is the best recruiter in the league, I think, over the last however long he's been managing. Every team he's built, you never look at any of the players he starts and thinks they're not at the level, they don't have what it takes. They might not be great players, they might not be Ballon d'Or contenders or something, but like every McInnes team is well recruited. The guys off the bench contribute. And when you add someone like him into that big network that they've got, that's just the perfect filter on making sure that the guys they bring in are got the best chance of working. And I think you've seen that quite quickly. That's what's happened. They've not even got half the guys that their record signing's injured. He's not even played yet. They've got a guy signed up to come in January already that McInnes is very excited about. If you hear him talking it, I heard him on one of those Premier Sports podcasts, I think, with Darryl Curry and Hutton and stuff like that. He was mentioning it. So I think Hearts are a very credible threat. With them not having European football this year and the way things have went over their first 6 or 7 games, I had them nailed in quite tight at second, but it's very quickly became a race because they're not going to play any more games as the season goes on. We might get out the Europa League and have another 2 games on top of what's scheduled already. And as for Rangers, I will say this quite gladly on the record, it is impossible for them to get into a title race. Their season is wiped. Their number one objective is get top 4, never mind top 3 or anything like that. They're so far behind the 8 ball. They've got Europa League games to run. They're going to want to overhaul the squad in January as well. I was hearing when the Martin thing broke last night, I was listening to Talk Sport. It's a very good show they do on a Sunday called Trans-Europe Express. They kind of go around Europe and just tell you some bits you might have missed and whatever. And the guy that hosts that show is a Tottenham fan, and obviously he's a journalist, so you figure he's got a connection or two here or there. And he was talking about how Tottenham want to recall Mikey Moore in January already because it's just like an absolute basket case. And when you think about how many loans they have and think about how many parent clubs are maybe sitting in a similar situation, like it's like they're going to hire Barry Ferguson. They're going to hire somebody like that because they're not going to get Sean Dyche. They're not going to get Steven Gerrard. They're not going to get this guy from Sheffield Wednesday. They might be able to get, but so many of the other guys that they're after, it's just not going to happen. And they're probably going to go, let's get wee Barry, Neil McCann back in and Billy Dodds, and we'll wait until we find the right man. Just steady the ship, sort the transfers out, sort the good eggs from the bad eggs. And that's not going to lead them up the table very quickly either, if that is the way they go. So last thing I'll kind of say, McInnes to Rangers, never going to happen. I don't think like that would be a really tough spot for him to take that offer. I think it would really be something that maybe keep him up at night, but I think ultimately he will see the chance he's got at Hearts is like a banker. You go to Rangers, God knows what happens. Like genuinely, God knows. The fans don't even want McInnes, so they could turn on him in a heartbeat, and then he's out on his plums. No Hearts job, no Rangers job, and what's he going to do? Go back to Kilmarnock or something? Like so. He's got to be. I don't think he moves at all. They do need to offer him an incredible amount of money. And as for us, the last thing I'll kind of say is, as I say, I think it really shines a mirror up to what we should be doing, how we should be acting, and how far ahead we should be. Of Hearts have spent like 10 million or something like that, and they have just bridged a huge gap in one summer. Hiring a new manager and signing a bunch of players, and we should be on those margins every transfer window, really.
Without a doubt. It always frustrates me when we bring in numbers rather than quality. Quinny, because we spend and we waste millions every single summer on just filling jerseys, and that really is what frustrates me. In a future episode, I'm pretty sure we will talk about the amount of players we've brought in who simply are not even in the squad, and you're spending millions of pounds every single summer on guys like that, and you're not even registering them in the Europa League squad. So I think we do have to look at recruitment in a big way. A few comments coming through, and then we will bring a couple of guests onto the show as well to talk about the meeting this evening from Celtic Fans Collective, the Urban Culture. Will those attending the truce talks be later seen as traitors? I don't think so. I don't think that will happen at all. I think it's pretty clear what the meeting is set up to achieve, and going into that meeting for the first time, a meeting of its type for the first time actually with anybody from the Celtic Board. I don't think you come out of that having not said your piece, but I also think that there needs to be clarity in what happens next. It's not as though you just go there, it's a greeting meeting, it's a box ticking exercise by the board. I don't think it can possibly be that. There needs to be follow-up, there needs to be actions, etc. So we'll be talking to representatives from the Celtic Fans Collective in just a few moments. Jay Conley, Jay Larkin, afternoon all, can't beat an injury time winner. Brave pass by Engels, composed play by Balikwisha, and a great run and finish by Dyson. I hope this is a turning point for certain players, and I hope Maeda can just tune in and be Dyson Maeda. I think he needs to shave his head. That's one of the things I think he needs to do, Quinny, to get back to his peak. Balikwisha, first time I've seen anything from him that I thought that's positive. Yes, he did have a chance at the back post where he probably should have got over it a wee bit better with the head, but he did really, really well, Quinny, in the lead up to the goal. He was composed, and a lot of people snap at that. He was composed, they found his man, and we win the game. What do you do with Balikwisha? Do you look at him as your backup left winger at the moment, and do you just try and build up his confidence and introduce him into games like this until he's clearly ready to start a game again?
I think he's a different type of left winger to what Rodgers wants, and he's very different to what Tuneki is. So there's a clear an A and a B situation, which I'm always quite happy for squads to have. It's nice to have different options and different kind of styles make fights situations. But I think when you watched what went well, he was only on the pitch for 12 minutes at the weekend. But when he came on, him, Engels and Negren were essentially like a three. They were quite present with one another. They were quite, and I say, I'll have a video out on Celtic here later. I'll show you some pictures. It'll make a bit more sense. But, and you're kind of cheating when you do stuff like that. And that's something that I thought Negren could offer us quite well on the right if we wanted to bring him in on the right-hand side. But it's a playmaker kind of winger. He wants to be on the ball. He doesn't really feel like he wants to take people on. It doesn't really feel like he's going to really do something all the time under pressure. He wants to kind of drift. He wants to float into little shadows and pockets and then have his pals find him for that killer ball, which is exactly how the goal went. And that's fine if you've got the rest of the team around it to make sure that works. But if you set up the way we were setting up, Balikwisha in every minute he's played so far this year has been isolated. If you look at any moment of any game he's been on, he's been there by himself in left wing. And maybe he's had one guy, maybe he's had two guys. I'm not saying he's been crowded out, but he's had nobody to play football with. He's getting the ball, and then it's like, well, I'm not going to dribble four guys, so I can't go anywhere. I'm not going to lose the ball. I'll move it back or I'll move it inside. And I think if you kind of need to know the player and put people around him in those areas, and you can see how effective it can be. So it's a different type of winger is probably the answer I would give. Yeah,
it might just be a slow burner, Quinny, and that's fine as well. So we've obviously chased him for a long time. There's been a lot of scouting in his recruitment, and we've paid a fair bit of money in terms of Celtic anyway to bring him to the club. So he's not getting written off. Now, I'm going to welcome a couple of guests who have already appeared over the years on a Celtic State of Mind. We have Paul and we have Scott as well. Great to see you guys. Big night tonight. We were just talking about the excitement at the weekend, Paul, but tonight at 6 o'clock we come together as a collective.
Yeah.
And we have a very important meeting. There's lots of people asking questions today about that meeting. Fill us in. What do we expect from tonight, Paul?
So, first of all, hello to you boys, and thanks very much for having us on and giving us the chance to kind of talk things through. And as you've said, you know, like it does seem to have been something that's like really grabbed the kind of public attention. You know, I was at a wedding on Saturday, and you know, like all day I was getting, you know, tugs in the arm, and you should say this to them, and you should do that, and those types of things. But I think it's important for people to understand, firstly, the kind of broader context. And also to, you know, kind of be realistic about, firstly, what we think can be achieved by a single meeting, a single coming together. And as you were saying just before we come on, where does this lead the campaign now? And I think it's important that people understand that this isn't, you know, just one meeting and then we kind of decide to unwind all of the work that we've done in kind of building the structure to this point. But we're only a few weeks on from the point of the window shuts. It's obviously not went the way that we had hoped. We had had a really disastrous start to the season in terms of the European qualification. And what we've seen, I think, was like a real anger that built up, and it was across the support. It was one of the few times that I can see in my own life of supporting Celtic that there was a real unity in terms of how people felt about the way that the board had treated us. And that was then reflected in the fact that a joint statement was released, and it was signed by, I can't remember what the kind of final figure was, but I know it was over 420 signatories. That included, you know, supporters buses, included supporter organisations, included podcasts and fan media, as well as the ultras groups. And I think that demonstrated very clearly to the board exactly where the kind of support stands. And then off the back of that, Paul John, you'll know yourself that we held a meeting of those signatories to try and better understand in person, how do people feel, where do people see Celtic going, what action do Celtic supporters want a potential body to take. And from that, we had a bit of debate and a bit of discussion, but it was clear there was, you know, an absolutely unanimous agreement that there had to be long-term change in terms of the direction of the club. And there was an overwhelming majority that agreed in particular that there should be the removal of the chief executive, the finance officer, as well as the chairman, in order to ensure that would be the case, that we would be best building a democratic fan body that could hopefully sustain a campaign, but also to kind of build, you know, a structure that would ensure that the club became answerable to fans in the short, medium and kind of longer term. And what we've done in the kind of interim of that is quite difficult to you know, build a kind of structure that's representative of our support, whilst also trying to ensure that you're actually campaigning and carrying out actions. And that's what we've done over the course of the last few weeks. You know, we've seen, first of all, the action at Kilmarnock, whereby people were asked not to kind of delay going in and have a late walk-in, which was broadly successful. We then seen actions at Partick Thistle, away in Belgrade, etc., that really highlighted visually the support's discontent with those in charge. And then we had the first of the silences against Hibs just over a week ago. And it's funny because, you know, I've seen obviously some of the comments coming in, and I've read some of the comments online. And like the very kind of nature of our support is that, first of all, it's massive, you know, and it's massive and it's diverse in terms of its opinion. People are opinionated, people are passionate about Celtic, and that's sort of the strength of our support. But it also means that, you know, you'll have some people who potentially want campaigning to speed up a little bit, maybe want a bit more disruption, maybe want to see things like boycotts, etc. Whereas other people were probably a little bit hesitant, even with the actions that we did call, you know, who don't like to see silences, even when they are relatively short, because they feel that it might impact the flow of the team. And the sort of challenge that's been set to us is trying to be representative of what the kind of match-going support generally wants, and to try and further those aims. And then when that offer was made to come in for the meeting, we felt that given that the campaign was initially built around that joint statement, which was about a series of key questions that we wanted answers to, that if we are demanding answers to those questions and they're willing to have a discussion about it, I think you at least need to go in and hear them out. But I don't expect anybody to be sort of standing in the stairs at Celtic Park after it, you know, given it the war is over, the Rebels have won. unfortunately, that's not going to be the case. I think we need to be realistic about what we can expect to get from a meeting. I think, first of all, we have the opportunity to go in and make absolutely clear, what changes need to be made in terms of the structural changes, in terms of the personnel changes, in terms of the strategic changes, and as well as a kind of change to their mindset of how they view and treat supporters. And I think that if we can get a clear blueprint for that, a timeline for that, and to really impress upon them that this is a line in the sand, this isn't fans throwing their toys out the pram because we lost a two-legged tie of football. This is part of a pattern of us being unprepared for Europe because we've underinvested, because we've failed to modernise, and it's taken us to a point whereby in sort of January, February, when we were having some of those European games against Aston Villa and Bayern Munich, that most of us probably felt we were really building to something special. And just 6 months later, it feels like it's almost completely collapsed, that the squad is nowhere near where it needs to be. And that would be one thing if this was a one-off, but it's happened too often. And I think that what we need to be doing tonight is to be making that clear to the board, and then we'll report back to not just the steering group, but to the signatories of the initial letter, the initial joint statement. And we'll try and ensure it's as democratic as possible so that fans have an opportunity to decide where we go from there. But the campaign will continue, and we absolutely retain the right to return to protests, once this meeting is over.
One of the important things you've said there for me, Paul, and it's a question that I've seen all over the socials, or anyone who's outside the bubble of Celtic looking in, and I'll throw this over to you, Scott, they say, what are you moaning about? Because they just think you've had one bad result or one bad round in Europe in a transfer window that you don't particularly feel that satisfied by. It's much bigger than that. I mean, in terms of constantly being unprepared for transfer windows, constantly being underprepared for qualifiers. 7 times out of 9 not getting past a level of team that you would expect Celtic, and with the finances we have to get past them. Storing money in a bank for a rainy day that you then create, Scott. It's not something that's happened overnight. This is not a knee-jerk reaction, is it?
Absolutely not. The phrase that I've been using, recently is death by 1,000 cuts. You've just listed all the things out there. We've watched it. I think the tipping point was Bayern Munich, because it showed what we could do. We can show the potential of this club. We're Celtic fans. We're biased. We know how big we think we are. But we started showing it. And then this summer, just as you say, we've reverted to type. It's the same old, we know better than you. We know. And this has been going on for years. Ronnie Dahlia moaned about the players he was getting in. Neil Lennon moaned about it. Ange moaned about it. Rodgers has moaned about it twice. Lennon moaned about it. So, be honest, if we keep on this same path, 2 years' time we'll be doing the exact same thing. So we've got a chance just now. Everything Paul says, I 100% agree with everything he said. We've got a chance here, and I would like to think this isn't about our ego. You know yourself, Paul John. It's not about us. This is about the collective. It's about every one of us coming together and doing our best for our club. And they guys on the board, they keep telling us they're fans. We'll start acting like it, because it's not good enough. And the whole thing is summed up with that abysmal statement they sent out to us. That statement was just disgusting, man. And people have got to trust this has all been done for the right reasons. This isn't about me, as Paul says, standing on the slopes of Celtic Park. Yes, we've won. This is about us becoming a functional working football club. And we've got it in us. We're not just simply a business, ultimately. I don't know if that answered your point. I kind of went away.
No, absolutely, Scott. I think also the frustration for me is we are successful if you look at the trophies that we win, but they use that almost as a stick to beat you with, Paul. Why are you moaning? Look at, counting the medals. This is something we always go back to. And we've won these medals. We've won quadruple trebles in spite of the dysfunction. This is what we're saying. So imagine what we could be and how strong we could be if we were actually running the club in such a way that, A, you don't just treat fans like customers, a cash cow that you can squeeze, time and time again. But also, B, you look to the future. Paul, this isn't just about the next transfer window or the next European endeavour. This is about the next 25 years, the next generation for Celtic fans as well. You look at that stadium. It's actually a disgrace, the state of the stadium these days, Paul. And fans are now cottoning onto it. And they're starting to make their own videos and send them in. And, it's been highlighted. And I think if the club hasn't stepped up and realised that this isn't just a few rabble-rousers before now, they've definitely realised that now because of the amount of signatories on that letter as well, Paul.
Yeah, so, I mean, for me, you make the point about the domestic success, and it's been incredible, right? We've all enjoyed it. We've all enjoyed the days at Hampden and the derby victories and everything that's come within that period. But it does have to be understood in context, in the context of rivals completely, disintegrating and sort of coming back as a new entity and continually making poor decisions themselves. It's also got to be understood for me within the context of, like, if you're looking at this campaign, how the support has reacted and what they've reacted to. So my argument would be, if you go back to the game against Aberdeen in the cup final in May, when we were really poor against a really poor Aberdeen team and we lost, people were annoyed, but I didn't hear anyone want to go to the front doors or anyone kicking up, because as bad as we were, it was a one-off game. You can't expect to win every final, every game. We've broadly had success at Hampden over the last decade or so, and that's part of being a football fan. You're not entitled to go and win any game just because we're Celtic, and I think vast majority of fans understand that. The difference with Almaty and what happened over the summer is it wasn't standalone. As you say, it's part of a much wider pattern, and for me, what I want from Celtic is for Celtic to just be the best version of Celtic that it can be. I want to believe that we are building towards something, tangible year on year. And whilst I get that we'll lose your Matt Riley's and some of your big players, I still want to believe that we can build to the point that we can go and have some form of success in Europe. And for me, we can talk about the domestic side, but for the inbuilt competitive advantages that we have, right, which is the money in the bank, the access to European football, the additional sponsorship that comes with our kind of global fan base, and the extra 10,000 season ticket holders that we have inbuilt advantages domestically. We should be measuring ourselves in terms of what we can do in the European stage, and time after time after time, particularly when it comes to qualifiers, which is really a test of your readiness. How prepared are you as a football club? Then, regardless of the fact that we've come up against clubs that generally have fewer resources and lower budgets than we do, because the scales are a little bit more level, we can't deal with it. And it's been a recurring theme now throughout the kind of tenure of the vast majority of the current board, and I think people's faith in them has broken. I don't think that people think that this board can turn it around. I don't think that they're going to have a come to Damascus moment where they realise, the error of their ways. So I think long term, they do have to be removed. But what we need to start with is by making that clear to them tonight.
Yeah, and the big thing as well, Paul, is as soon as that happens tonight at 6 o'clock, you're going to have people online dying for information, because this is the world in which we live, right? It's almost like, we want instant gratification. I think it's 81 times a day on your phone. That's how many pickups you get on average. So what we need to say is, listen, as a collective, we're going to have to be consistent. We're not going to leak information, and then we will collectively put that out first to the signatories, and then obviously we'll make an announcement as well, Paul, won't we?
Yeah, that's the plan, and I completely understand the sort of interest around this. And again, it comes from people's passion for the club. Like, we all live and breathe Celtic, and the fact that even though we got a win at the weekend, the performance wasn't great, everyone's still a bit worried about the kind of direction of travel that we're going in. So they want to hear about what's going on within the club. They want to hear if there's news in terms of a potential change, or if the campaign is really coming out and saying that, no, we really need to redouble our efforts to pressure these people. What we'll do to the best of our ability is to communicate with the signatories, which will then be communicated more broadly through our social media channels. I think we'll also have 2 other representatives on here potentially over the next few days to mix it up and make it clear that it's not about, you know, the faces that you see either on these channels or who communicating in other ways. We're just representative of the kind of organisations that have signed it, who are hopefully broadly representative as a support, and we'll do our best to represent their interests tonight and beyond.
Listen, thank you very much for both of your times, Paul and Scott. I'll see you tonight at Celtic Park. And as soon as we possibly can, we will share the information to the wider fan base. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. 2,200 strong, watching a Celtic State of Mind on a Monday afternoon. And thank you once again to Quinny for joining us on a Celtic State of Mind. Thank you.
Smashing. Cheers.